Hi, this is Amir Anzor, Chief Marketing Officer of Pakistan Software Export Board, where we run Tech Destination Pakistan, and we encourage people to do business with Pakistan. And one of the great people that I ran into at an event that we organized at Stanford University last week was Faruq Bhagani. Faruq is a sales leader. He's worked with Fortune 200 companies, and he's generated over $250 million in sales. He's based in Houston, Texas, and he is a phenomenal guy to know and learn about the world of sales, especially in the North American market. And just to give you a background, Pakistan exports 56% of its exports to North America, to the United States. And you'll find pretty much most countries do the same. You know, America is by far the biggest market there is for software and technology. And Farouk is the guy to know if you want to enter that market. So Farouk, just first start off with your background. We were both at Accenture, but just give us your background, and then we'll go on to what sales is and how you got into it, and tips that you can give our entrepreneurs and CEOs and executives, because sales is the lifeblood of business. It's if you don't have cash coming in, you're out of business. So you're going to help us achieve that.
Well, thank you for a very flattering intro. And to the people in Pakistan, Assalamu alaikum. Very nice to meet everybody through this venue. I'll give you a little brief history on myself, Amir, just so people can understand the context. I am proudly Pakistani by birth and grew up in North America, and then had the good fortune of interacting with Pakistan over the years. My wife was born and raised in Pakistan, and I'm there pretty regularly, at least once a year. And through my journeys and travels as a salesperson, one of my stops ended up being Dubai. And obviously being very close to Pakistan and then integrating with Pakistan, I started to discover how much talent our country has. It's an amazing plethora of talent. And I really thought about it. And during my sales career, I was always good about promoting what I believed in. And this also became part of my mission, is to try to promote what's good about Pakistan and looking at the tech talent and what's happening there. As I had mentioned to you, Amir, I started a podcast about 4 years ago during the midst of COVID with the intention of educating people in North America about what was happening in the Pakistan tech startup ecosystem. And I did 140 episodes. So I became really plugged into what was happening on the ground. And a pivot out of that came was the ability to start helping people in Pakistan engage in the North American market.
Awesome. So what is sales? Just in brief, like, what is sales? What does it take to be a good salesperson in your opinion?
So, the one thing, Amir, a lot of people, and I think this is one thing we as Pakistanis are really, really good at. We're really good at kind of figuring out the details and then extrapolating from the details out. And when I look at sales is a lot of an art form, right? And it's something that requires you to really engage at a human level with people and understand how they think, what they want, and where they're trying to get to in terms of their personal motivations and in terms of their professional motivations. So the canned answer would be, in my opinion, sales is understanding needs and wants of a potential customer, and then being able to deliver that in a way that makes sense to them professionally, personally, and financially.
Okay. And in your career, what's some of the better salespeople you've met? Like, what were their qualities? What made them good? What were some of the mentors that you came across that you were like, I want to be like that person in your sales?
Yeah. If I could step back just 1 second and tell you, there's different selling personas, right? And what you'll find is I've met very effective personas across the spectrum. So the one persona that I ascribe to is the relationship seller. So I'm someone who really enjoys engaging with people, understanding what their challenges are, and then trying to help them solve that challenge. Now, there are other personas. There are personas that are very analytical and want to really be the problem solver and figure out the pieces of the puzzle and help that potential customer get to an endpoint. So, is there a magic button that says, "Oh, do this and you'll become a great salesperson"? No, I think it's an acquired art. It's something you have to refine, and I think a lot of it's dependent on how you let your personality flow into a situation. The three things I've seen that always work with being a good salesperson is being as genuine as possible, right? And that's sometimes you get mislabeled, right? That's just comes with the territory. The other thing I feel is empathy, right? Is just being empathetic to a situation, understanding where and what that person or that company or that situation is in, and then trying to adapt yourself to that. And last but not least, likability. People want to work with people they like. So if you don't feel like you're being able to put yourself out there that way, it's going to work against you. That's my personal opinion.
And what do you think about selling in the digital world? I mean, you are right now in Houston and you're earning, top dollars. You could just as easily be in Islamabad like I am, but you mentioned that, we have to train people in Pakistan to think and talk like Americans and sort of understand the American way of living and the culture. How would you go about that? How, if you had a magic wand to train people in their thousands, what kind of tips would you give them?
That's a great question. And, it's funny because I figured we were going to get into the cultural piece. So I feel like the way for people to be able to ascribe and understand what's going on here is really important, right? So getting to know a little bit about how an American persona works, what people like to do here. It's really important, right? People are big into athletics here. People have very specialized hobbies and capabilities. Knowing a little bit about the American landscape. You don't want to talk about it, but knowing about the politics here is important too, right? Understanding, what spectrum people are in, what part of the country they live in. That's really important too. So the magic wand, in my opinion, is some type of a cultural sensitivity training platform, right? Which indoctrinates. I don't want to say indoctrinate. I don't want us to change our culture, but what I mean is it helps you learn how things work in this country. Therefore, you can identify with your potential customer, right? And what I've seen that typically works well, and I'm firsthand because I work in this world, is I find Pakistanis to often be very, very bright and extremely focused on getting things done. But sometimes they miss the nuances that come with the situation here. And that boils down to trust building. And how do you build trust? By understanding your audience and what they enjoy and don't enjoy and how they interact.
What do you mean? How do you figure that out, what they enjoy and don't enjoy?
When I typically open up a relationship or a conversation with somebody and I don't know them, my first my first bug is curiosity. How do I learn about Amir? What is Amir like? What is he not like? So if I learned a little bit about Amir, he's a tech guy. He went to school in the UK and Belgium. He worked in big consulting firms. So I'm starting to look for nuggets and pieces to connect with you, right, as a potential customer. That's really important to do. The challenge is, we walk into situations and people want to immediately get to, hey, I'm doing this and this is great and I can make this work for you and you will be the best person and your company will be the best company in the world. That doesn't always strike on the motivational factor, right? So let's look at motivation. Let me connect with you first as a person and understand what it is you like and don't like. What are you trying to achieve? And then naturally the flow of that will open up into something. Unfortunately, it takes time and energy to do that. And a lot of people want to get through something, move it, and get on with it. And unfortunately, that doesn't always work, particularly in the type of sales I do, which is at the enterprise level.
And what is enterprise level? What's business to business and what's business to consumer? What's the difference between those three?
Sure. So enterprise level means you're in a B2B situation, so a business selling to a business. But enterprise generally means a larger company selling to a larger company, right? So if we want to frame larger, enterprise I've seen ranges anywhere from in the United States 5 billion, right? To, the top end 100 billion, whatever, right? That typically is what I've seen is ascribed as enterprise. Now, there's small medium, which runs anywhere from 10 million to up to 5 billion. Everybody qualifies and quantifies this a little differently. That's enterprise. So an example is right now, my last role at Accenture, I'm selling to healthcare provider systems, right? That are a couple of $1 billion or larger, right? So in my case, I'm considered an early enterprise seller, right? From a B2C perspective, that's the one to many, right? So I, as a propagator of platform X, right? I don't want to promote anybody, but that platform is individually catered to a person. There's a monthly subscription attached to that. That's a very different selling mechanism. In fact, that's not even possible to do in a one-to-one environment. That's a one-to-many with a marketing capability that has to be attached.
Okay. And in terms of your uh, outlook on meeting goals and in the enterprise world, how did they make you sell? You worked at Salesforce as well, and Salesforce is explain to everyone what a CRM or a customer relationship management system is. What is that, and why is Salesforce one of the leaders? And how did they incentivize you to meet targets? And how were you doing selling for an organization like Salesforce?
Absolutely. So back to the first question, what is a CRM? Most people in my type of role um, rely heavily on memory indexing and that type of capability to build and manage a relationship. The problem with that is it's very effective at the one-to-one level with the customer. It's very ineffective when you're working in a large organization and your management wants to see what you're doing. So where CRM plays a role in my world is it's the place where I have to input and manage opportunities that I'm driving towards. And Salesforce became the market leader in this environment simply by, in my opinion, listening to their customers and then delivering that capability as quickly as possible and being super effective on the engagement side from a sales perspective. So the CEO of that company, the sitting CEO of that company, if people go do their research on him, he was the youngest VP of sales at Oracle. He's a very savvy guy. He's very, very people connected and understands how to connect and sell through. He built that culture around himself. And when I went to Salesforce, here's the appeal. I mean, I was a late career guy when I joined Salesforce. And the reason why I wanted to join Salesforce is there was a lot of buzz and excitement around what they were creating for the customer. And the way they motivate people like me is through fantastic compensation packages. And to be honest, most people who are in sales, you are here primarily because you are income driven. I'm just going to put that out there. That's really why you're doing what you're doing. And it comes with its highs and lows. But Salesforce did a fantastic job of really motivating us and allowing us to earn the maximum amount of money in the space we were in.
And what kind of training did they give you? What did they say that this is how you should sell? Were you picking up the phone and dialing 100 people a day, or what kind of selling were you doing? Because I'm going to compare that to what you were doing at Accenture and see what the difference between those two companies was.
Sure. So in the SaaS world, particularly the enterprise SaaS world, you have different layers and capabilities already built within the sales organization. So the entry point, which you're talking about, is what they call a BDR or an SDR. And that's a person that's going to be making lots of, cold calls and cold emails and trying to engage and open up doors for people like myself. I'm considered an enterprise seller. So they bring me in when there's somewhat of an opportunity to look at, And then there's a need to build and establish a relationship with the customer, understand the needs and the business requirements for the customer, and then really help them drive towards a decision that favors us, right? And there's a lot of complexities that come with that, right? And you come from this world too, so you know the word RFP. So that's a very
When you say words like SDR, BDR, you got to spell out the acronyms for everyone.
I will do that. So SDR is a sales development representative, and BDR is a business development representative. So one typically works with warm leads that are incoming, and that's what that's what I've seen as sales development representative. And business development representative I've seen as your outbound cold calling and cold emailing. So, and what cold means is you don't know this person, you're just randomly firing, right? And you're trying to craft a messaging and a capability to engage with these people.
Okay. Awesome. And then when you were working at Accenture, was it more you were selling people face to face, or when you were doing it on Salesforce, were you on the phone at home, working from home, or were you going into the office, or were you working from home? And did you actually meet customers face to face? And was it different at Accenture?
Yes. So I will go ahead and quantify for you the differences between the roles. So as a SaaS seller, my mandate was software as a service. My mandate was a little different. So here's what would typically happen, and I'll describe to you my territory and what I would do. At the time, I was based in California. I lived outside of Los Angeles. And Salesforce at that point had a requirement to be in the office 3 days a week, right? We had an office with portable desks. That's the new routine in the US. You know, there's never enough space for every employee, but people rotate in and out. As a software seller in these environments, you are expected to be out and about in front of customers, like taking them to lunches, trying to meet them, going to conferences. There's always an engagement platform that you're looking to engage with customers with. So in my case at Salesforce, I was in that situation. And then what happened? COVID. And that just blew the world apart, right? And you were familiar with that. Everybody went home. Everybody started working from home. But then there was this immediate push to continue discussions and keep going. And I got very fortunate that I closed one of my biggest deals at Salesforce over Zoom, right? It was literally done without me ever having actually interacted directly with anybody. But the needs and the requirements aligned. There was a big push to move more things to digital, and that ended up happening. So that was a great experience for me personally. And most enterprise sellers that I know of are now remote, right? So I've not sat literally full time in an office since the early, I'd say 2012. Literally, it's been that long since I've been in an office on a permanent basis. So with Accenture, the difference is I moved from the SaaS, software as a service world, to the enterprise tech services world, which is now I have this software capability, or I have multiple software capabilities in my organization. I need to integrate them. I need to upgrade them. I need to change them. I need things to work more efficiently around my organization. And that's what you call digital transformation, right? So just bringing systems up to speed, getting them more connected. Accenture focuses on the services delivery side, which you recall from your days, right? It is, okay, we're going to recommend how to best do this, and then we're actually going to do the integration and the merger of this capability for you. Now, at Accenture, fully remote role, it's a very large organization, over 750,000 employees, globally based. But I had a very specific focus point, and that was working with Salesforce in the healthcare sector within my region, right? So it was very, very specific. This is the type of opportunity you go after. This is what you try to build. And the process at Accenture that was different is when I was at Salesforce, there was a very strong likelihood that that customer I was working with didn't have that particular Salesforce solution with them. They might use the CRM, which is for managing sales and customer service interaction. But I sold a very specific line of business within Salesforce, which had to do with quote to cash, right? So how do you quote a customer for products? How do you send them invoices? How do you manage that whole cycle more effectively? So the beauty of my situation is I'm looking at net new, right? This is new revenue for Salesforce. And therefore I was compensated accordingly. At Accenture, what's typically happening is either they have the existing capability and they need to improve or modify or upgrade, or if they're even looking at doing an implementation of this platform, it's at a much broader scale, right? So they're going to be doing something across the enterprise. So that's the specific difference as I see it between the SaaS piece and the services piece.
Awesome. And you started now, what I really liked about your uh, business that you've started is that what you're helping is Pakistani companies based out in Pakistan. You take a retainer of a couple of $1,000s, and then you take a commission to help them, and you have multiple clients that you work with. So you are a uh, I think they could call that fractional sales director or something, because I've heard about fractional COO and now I'm hearing about fractional sales director. I guess I don't know what you want to call yourself, but basically, so explain to us that model and how you're helping companies do that.
Sure. So as we discussed earlier, I'm a real passion for what's good in Pakistan. We have a lot of tech talent. It's really, really incredible because I just love to see the look on people's faces when I introduce my clients to them. Because there's an unfortunate preset expectation of X, but that real expectation when you bring people to the table is wow, right? I didn't know this talent existed, right? Now, it's good. We're working on that messaging. We're trying to be positive forward on that. And I really encourage that. So my passion behind this was simply that as a Pakistani who grew up here, I've been very blessed. I have been given tons of opportunities that I may have never had. So it's in my purview to give back. And this is my way of giving back and helping these companies develop that. So the essence of what really works is when you are able to work with these Pakistani companies and then help and coach them because technically they're amazing. I mean, the things they achieve and accomplish and the projects they work on, it's sometimes it's mind blowing. You can't believe that they did this and nobody knows about it, right? And that's what really, really bothers me is that, our companies just don't get the limelight that they deserve. So I felt like the best way to help companies there is to integrate them into this situation. And then the fractional piece comes from this. I'm at a stage in my career where I felt like I can bring a lot of value to people, but I don't want to get tied to one company and one quota, right? That's something I've been doing for 35 years now. And I felt like if I can take some of the knowledge that I've developed and built up working with these companies and pass that to companies in Pakistan and still make a reasonable living out of it, nothing better. Everybody wins. And I feel like in the situations that I've been in so far, all of my clients, what I love is, I don't accept everybody I work with, right? I have to, I have to go through a process with people and make sure they meet the mark and fit the bill, right? Because personalities are important. Chemistry is important to match, right? Solution capability, their ability to articulate what they do is very important. I like to help and develop that with them too. So in a nutshell, promoting the Pakistan capability in North America is super important at a one-to-one level. And I also feel like we have a lot of fans here. It doesn't seem like it, but we do because there's plenty of people sitting here like me who are saying, you know what? Why not Pakistan? What is it that we're not good at? We're good at a lot of different things. Just got to find the right people for the right place.
And what are some of the things that you coach your let's say you took me on, I'm a CEO. I've got what's the minimum number of employees? Maybe like 50 or 100.
50 is the bottom.
Okay. So I've got 50 employees. I'm a little frustrated because I want to get to 100. Um, you would, how would you start coaching me to say, this is how we can get you more sales and leads. And you're going to bring in this professionalism that you learn from the big organizations, that I might not have because I've hustled my way into probably calling my aunt, and her nephew has given me some business. And then you bring in some sort of professionalism into this.
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail right on the head, which is, it's a very typical scenario I run into. So the way I typically approach things is when I have a client come forward who wants to work with me, I do a little dissection, right? I figure out, okay, what is it you do and what do you do really well? Because one thing that we Pakistanis are really good at is finding a little niches in commoditized stacks, and then really being cost effective and aggressive about getting that out there. So what I try to tell people is, look, you want to go to enterprise level, you got to find a focus point, right? You got to find something that you're really good at and then keep doing that. Now that's hard to do. I get it, because when you're a small company, you know, all revenue is green, right? You want that in. But I tell people, look, use that as a conduit, because what I see for a lot of Pakistani service providers is they're using the services conduit to build a product. And I'm like, guys, why not focus on using the services conduit to become the master of a solution, right? A particular vendor stack or a particular vertical, right? And what I do is I look for that DNA, right? So if that, I find that in the founder and the team, I'm very excited by that. Number one. Number two, it's also very dependent on the energy of the CEO and the founders, right? So if it's a low energy situation where they're not willing to learn and they're like, I got this, I know what I'm doing, this is the way I want to do it, it becomes challenging for me, right? So there has to be an openness to say, okay, you know what? We're willing to listen and focus, because that's the experience I bring to the table, right? So those are some of the key factors I look for in terms of identifying. The most successful of my clients are the ones who really figure out how to engage with a customer, how to build a relationship, how to get them past any negativities they might have, right? And I have probably right now 3 key clients that are super good at this. And I'll tell you the formula that works, right? That I've seen time and again. The term Wapistani, that really helps, right? People who have been exposed out, right? Have worked with North America or have been educated in North America or returned from North America. They seem to have a good understanding and gravity of how to build on that. Now, not everybody has that, but some people have that sensibility about them, even though they've not been outside. So that Wapistani mindset really helps, in my opinion. The other key factors in my mind that really work is when people are willing to commit to a term and see things through, right? The problem I get, and I understand that, I've spent so much time back home that I think the art of the sale, it's super transactional, right? And what I found when I did my first entry point into Pakistan, the feedback I would get right away was, okay, well, yeah, if I pay you, how many deals do I get? And I would turn around and look at people, and it's really brazen. I did this very brazenly. I said, 0. You are going to get your deals. I'm going to help you get there. And that was the whole mindset that had to play. So I said, you got to step away from being transactional about things, and you got to be able to look at things from a relationship perspective and development and build. And by the way, we have some very successful Pakistani companies out there who are doing this exceptionally well. We just need more.
Okay, that's really awesome. Okay, and what do you think stops these companies from growing? Like, what is it that stops these companies from doubling their revenues? Typically, what's the low-hanging fruit that you help them figure out?
I got my biggest chagrin, unfortunately, is, and I really don't want to accentuate somebody else or, downplay us. Our neighbors have done a really good job of figuring out how to work in this environment, right? And I saw the evolution of that. And here's the funny part. I get calls every day. Hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? I see this constant curiosity and willingness to invest in the selling environment. I find a lot of hesitation with that within our environment. And I can understand. Here's why. And I see the challenge. You're building trust with somebody, right? And you're expecting they're going to go do something. Now, right now people are looking at me and saying, "He talks a great game. What can he actually do?" Right? That you get that all the time, right? Here's the reality. I will figure out the sensibility and the track for you. I will help you do that, right? End of the day, you got to get it done, right? It's your company, right? So, what I try to emphasize to people is that surround yourself with smart people, learn, build, coach, but only you can be your own steward, right? Nobody's going to do that for you. Just because you pay somebody doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? How many times have people done software projects where things have gone south? That happens every day. I feel like if we had $1 for every project that failed, we'd be very, very wealthy people right now. So the point being is that it's no different in the selling environment. You have to be able to understand, take on what works for you, and then leverage that into your customer base. And a lot of people have done a good job of doing that. But I find the biggest challenge in the US is people aren't investing in that. They're investing in architects. They're investing in, building the capabilities. So like I have this awesome capability to do X, but here's the problem, Amir. Nobody knows you do that. How do you get the word out? How do you put yourself out there? And I appreciate and respect what platforms like Upwork and Fiverr and all these guys do. They open a channel and a funnel. But remember, you're just at the tip of the iceberg there, right? In order to get into enterprise and to companies, you've got to have some facing here. And that's where it becomes important to align yourself with people accordingly.
Awesome insights. And in terms of if I'm looking to grow my own self in my ability like you have, what I can see is that you have a Muslim sounding name. Do you think that hurt you in any way? Like having a like you're not called Tom Peters or Tom Jones, or do you think that causes friction, or you didn't find that that much of a friction in your 30 plus years in America, at least?
That's a great question, Amir. And it does. I'll tell you what's happened. It's an evolution, right? So I grew up outside of Houston in a very rural place, and just the snapshot is, I went to a high school with 1,600 kids in it. There was one Pakistani. That was me. So I experienced what it was like being different in this environment. Now, what maybe might have spared me a little bit is the look, right? People really couldn't tell, right? So, but my father also was a very proud Pakistani, and he would say to us, he would say, "Do not change your name. You are who you are. Be proud of who you are. Represent yourself that way." And that's always stuck with me. So sometimes I become frank, right? It just depends situationally. Back then, it was really interesting because I would meet with very traditional, American people, and they didn't really understand much. And I had to extract value from that situation. So if they say, "What's your name?" But what? I'll just call you Frank. I'd be okay with that. I just rolled with it because I knew I had to get to the end point. Today, it is amazing. And again, because of just the plethora of overseas talent that's come into the tech world, uh, people with very, very difficult names. I'm not picking on any one country or place, but there are places in our part of the world where the names are just unpronounceable, right? That whole name has to be said completely correctly, right? People apologize to me. "Did I say your name correctly?" So we're seeing an evolution in terms of the way things are here now. Now, on the inside channel, they may meet you, you may have a different name, they may identify you as a Muslim or whatever. I think people are people, and they're really looking to figure out, can I connect with this person? Does this person make sense to me? And here's the funny part. Like if you see my wall back here, I appreciate good music. I appreciate golf. I appreciate different things. There are always these other areas and things we can connect on that we have in common. And then I focus on that. And that's the way you get over things here.
And you grew up in the United States, so you have an American accent. What can we do to improve people's accent here in Pakistan so that you sitting in Houston feels no different than me sitting in Islamabad, or someone that's grown up here? Do you think what I'm seeing from my nephews and cousins and others that have never even traveled to the outside Pakistan is because they're seeing YouTube from an early age and they're watching Mr. Beast. They are getting the accent much better than the generation before. Are you finding that as well?
I am. And so here's, there's 2 points to it, right? And I will insert, मैं उर्दू fluently बोलता हूँ और मैं नहीं बोलता था बचपन में, right? So one of the miss points I'm seeing, we have a beautiful language, we have a beautiful culture, right? It ain't perfect. We all know that. But it is beautiful and it's ours and it's unique. I feel like if you can be in both worlds and leverage what you need, it's great. What scares me a little bit is too much of a pull into that culture, right? Because then we lose some of the values that we have that we treasure, right? And I think that's always the dilemma on a personal level, right? Because my biggest chagrin with my kids is they don't speak Urdu. They understand it fully, but I really have to push them now to say, guys, you need to lever in. You need to understand your culture and your language. That's the problem with being here. So when I see people in Pakistan, what I would recommend, especially to younger people, embrace what's coming from the globe, but love what's yours too. There's a lot to love about what we have. And I don't know why people don't understand that. Maybe because they're stressed or pressed or whatever, but we are unique and we should keep that uniqueness. And by the way, most people that I've seen that come from strong cultures like ours tend to embrace and live that culture. And I see that all around me. They'll be very proud of their names. They'll be very proud of their heritage. They're very proud of their food and their language. Why not? That's what makes America, America, right? It makes us diverse.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of America. It is like everyone's a Polish American or an Arab American or a African American, and this is the beauty of it. It's like going to an international school all in one country.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are but these are the questions as a chief marketing officer of tech destination Pakistan. We've got to think how to help people sell more, right, from this country and
Yep.
export more. And those are great insights because I have gone to some call centers and everyone's a Lisa and a Steve. And I think that does save you some time on especially when you've got a couple of seconds to get through to the right buyer and all this sort of stuff. But I think it's a personal decision whether you change your name to Frank or Faruq. But it is a decision because everything is a part of your brand. Now you also run a podcast. You recorded over 150 episodes. Can you tell us how many episodes do you do?
130.
100?
You're 140.
Okay, 140 episodes. Can you tell me like some of the benefits that you got out of it and what you would recommend to other people if they should do what you did in following your footsteps?
Sure. Yeah. So the benefit for me personally, again, being passionate about Pakistan positive, that was like my message, right? Like I need people to know what we do well and what we do good, right? Too much negativity, I don't want to deal with it. I want to stay positive. So let's talk about things that are working in that environment and the people that are helping to propel that. And that's basically where the podcast started. So it's called Tech Check. And the entire environment was finding young entrepreneurs who were out there trying to create something or build something and then highlighting them into North America. Now, my format was very different. I did maximum 15 to 20 minutes. And it was like, who are you? What are you doing? What is this all about? What's the end game? And just getting these people out there and highlighting them. Now, along the way, I found I was very lucky. The personal benefit to me was that in Pakistan, within the entire tech ecosystem, I became known as this one guy who was out there trumpeting what's happening in Pakistan. So now across Pakistan, I found I would get random messages and calls from people and, hey, you're doing good stuff. Can you help us? And then there was another person who did something even better and bigger, and you're familiar with that platform. And they did a great job of bringing people together. So end state was I was able to positively impact messaging and capability for Pakistan, which led me to this.
Which is basically you finding your niche, which is helping Pakistani companies export to American market. Now, what's the difference between selling in America to Europe per se? I noticed you went to Oxford for your MBA, and basically, so you lived in the UK. And what do you think the difference is between selling in Europe and the US?
Yeah. Just to quantify, I did my master's degree in finance from Oxford, and this is while I was in Dubai. So I got to spend, is an executive master's program. So, but I did spend a lot of time in the UK. The perspective I found, particularly in Europe, that the typical selling focus you find in the US is, I think, fairly unique to the US. I think the US they have created probably the most capable selling environment in the world. That's my opinion. European environments, a little more traditional, a little more focused on longer term capability, right? And how they operate and the way they run. Their environments, their societies run much more traditionally and slower than the US environment. And the US environment is always about creating the next thing and building the next thing and going to the next level and building. So I found I've sold in Europe in the sense that when I was at IBM, I was working with a big European crew because we were attached to Europe. And the process and the thought process, I would not say it was any different in terms of intellectual capability or, the focus, but it was slower and less punch in the face driven, right? It was more background and let's build and let's figure this out. Whereas in the US, there's a lot of let's get it done. It's just that mindset that is very pervasive here.
And what about Dubai? How did you feel about being in Dubai and the Gulf and the Middle East, basically?
I loved it. It was a great middle point for me. I was really embraced in Dubai because I was bicultural. I spoke, language. What most people probably know who are Dubai based is that when I arrived in Dubai in the early 90s, you didn't need to know Arabic. You need to know Urdu. That was the glue. That was the language that everybody could speak and, glue you together. And English was secondary then, right? So obviously that's changed now. I found the experience really good because I brought a US mindset from a sales perspective and a corporate perspective that people there, they knew I was Muslim. They knew I'm from here and I'm one of them, but I'm not one of them because I kind of grew up here. So it was a great bicultural experience and they really accepted that and it really helped me thrive. So I ended up doing a lot of very interesting things over there.
So, what's on your horizon? What's your next 5 to 10 years looking like? What do you think, or is that too far ahead? What do you want to do?
No, realistically, the next 5 years is a reality for me. Um, I'm finding that there's a culmination of experience that's coming together, right? And I really want to lever that experience to help Pakistan, right? And how that is and how that morphs, I'm not sure. I think there's different steps to it. I'm being approached to look at starting a services company that focuses on a sector that's not been delved into yet. I've been asked to, join bigger companies on a full-time basis. My heart really lies in the startup world, right? And the entrepreneurship piece and helping. I just love seeing young people grow. And I have one of my clients who I helped double his business last year. And just the warmth you get that that he's hiring more people. He bought himself a house. It's awesome. It's a good feeling knowing that there's a real downstream impact to what you're doing. I think a lot of that feeling is going to keep driving the directionality of what I do, but it'll definitely be within this space.
Wow. So a touch of Pakistan, US, and doing some good in the startup world. Yeah. And the thing is, you can't predict everything that's going to come out of it because that's by definition what's different about it. And final tips for people starting out in sales. I'm doing my first startup. I've never done sales. And I remember doing my first startup, never done sales. And I ended up reading so many Brian Tracy books. And because I was avoiding the the prospect of picking up the phone and actually doing it, that I kept reading books on actually selling to avoid it because I was so scared. But what are some tips that you would give people that are just starting up their first startup or their company and want to make some money from selling a product or a service?
I would say know your audience. Spend some time researching who are you targeting, right? What are you trying to get to, right? So I'll give you an example. So if you're targeting a specific type of service, you do your research, get on LinkedIn. What are the typical profiles of a 8 to 10 year administrator on the database side, right? It's a pretty broad platform. You'll see all kinds of people, but you'll start to see patterns, right? And you'll see, oh, okay, he's a 38-year-old male, right, who went to a state college, has 10 years of experience, looks like he might have been athletically involved, or he likes athletics, or he doesn't. You see what I'm saying? So you start and then understand that audience, and then find ways to connect at that level. I found the most successful interactions. I tried to build a BDR pool of my own in Pakistan at one point. And the most successful interactions were from the ones that were coming in saying, hey, I was online and I saw you went to Carnegie Mellon. Oh, and, isn't that where Elon Musk went? Right. And it was just curiosity things and like people would fire back. Someone might fire back who doesn't like Elon and say, but at least you got a reaction, right? And say, oh, Elon is, oh, Elon, he's, but you see what I mean? So you find these tangents, but the problem is it's very difficult for you to say, do this pattern over and over again, and it's going to happen. You have to kind of be thinking about, how am I going to grab this person's attention, right? And either it's going to be through their hobbies or through their, so I'll give you another example of a way to approach it. So I cold called a CFO of a company here who was my customer. Now, here's the interesting part. He just happened to be Pakistani, but he grew up here. And I reached out to him on LinkedIn and I said, hey, you're like me. You're Pakistani American. I do this. I work with Open. Are you familiar with Open? Guess what? He responded right away. And I was able to connect and build a friendship with this guy around that, right? So people in Pakistan can do the same thing here. It's just finding that connectivity point with people, right? And it's not going to always work, but you got to keep trying.
And I see you use LinkedIn Premium. How do you like that? And do you recommend that for people? What are the benefits?
For a sales guy, it's like, it's like a cowboy without a gun, right? It's a pistol. You got to have it, right?
What are you doing with it? Like, describe to us what you're doing day to day with it.
So here's an interesting one. You and I met, right? And we met for a few minutes. What's the first thing I do? I go to LinkedIn and I look up your profile. I'm like, okay, who is Amir? What is he all about? Where do you go to school? How do you think I know you went to school in Brussels?
Yeah.
Right? See, I'm gonna find ways immediately to to connect with you, right? And that's where that tool is important because you're putting out to the world what you want the world to know, right? And if I know that and I took the time to figure that out, you're gonna be intrigued and be like, how did he know I went to school in Brussels? I looked at your LinkedIn. Oh, okay. So I'm curious, right? And that's a big part of the curiosity factor has to play.
Are you also using Facebook and Instagram or any of the others, or are you focusing 80% of your efforts on LinkedIn?
I use Facebook more on a personal note.
Yeah.
Um, but there is one good thing about Facebook. So as you get to know people from a business perspective, Facebook reveals a lot about their personal interests. So I think with the certain people like, oh, he's a big golfer. Oh, he's a big traveler. He's a hiker. He's a jogger. He's blah, blah, blah. So you can always ask these questions, right? Say, oh man, I saw you just did like an Ironman. That's pretty cool. How'd you get into Ironman? And you know what people love to talk about more than anything else? Themselves.
Yeah.
So you just get people talking about themselves. They open up naturally, right? And guess what? When they like talking to you, when you pivot to the next conversation, well, what do you? Yeah, that's, I don't do much in that area, but you know what? Let me find out for you. That's interesting. You're not always going to get that response, but a lot of times people are less likely to refuse an interaction because you took the time to figure them out, right? They know you're curious.
That was one of my questions. If because I worked in sales as a CEO, but not as hardcore. I never felt as hardcore as picking up the phone 500 times. And I always thought, like, would it not be boring to do that? But then I guess with sales, it's always unique because every person is unique, and then you're finding a unique way to close the deal for them and find them so that every you problem solving constantly.
And the one thing, Amir, I would always recommend to you and the audience, don't look at the customer as a commodity because that comes through. I don't look at someone I'm talking to and say, "Oh, I'll get this out of them." I look at them and say, I'm curious. I'm really intrigued by you. You got a cool story. You have a cool story. You grew up in Europe, you moved back to Pakistan, you took this role. I'm intrigued. Like what drove that journey, right? And you know what's going to happen in the middle is somewhere there's going to be some level of endearment that happens. You're going to be like, yeah, Farouk's a nice guy. He wants to know about me, whatever. And so if I call you tomorrow and I say, hey, Amir, I need your help with something, you're more likely to pick up the phone and say, sure, how can I help? Right? Whereas if you go straight into the transaction, people are like, oh no, another transaction. Everybody knows what the end game is, right? It's just the way you approach it. And that's what I keep trying to tell people here. And unfortunately for us, I am realistic. I'm technical enough to be dangerous, but I'm not technical, right? I'm a seller. Our technical people are super sharp, right? Architects solve the problem. And that's the way they look at the sale. Say, well, I called him. Why didn't he call me back? I'm trying to solve his problem. Maybe he has 10 other people trying to solve his problem, right? That's what you gotta think about, right? So how do I endear myself to people to get them to want to engage with me? Because at the end of the day, what do we want from them? We want a sale.
And I think oftentimes people are not uh, aware that they could introduce people in doing referrals and sales. So, for instance, I met someone at a party yesterday, at a dinner. They had a company of about 50 people, and he's like, "Oh," I'm like, "How do you do your sales?" And that was just because I'd spoken to you the night before, and then I'm like, "Oh, I got to introduce you to these guys." And I think there's what we as diaspora can do, even those people that are working in a place like a company like an Accenture, is simply open doors for companies that are trying to make it or break it into the US, right? So I think there's a part that everyone can play because, there is giving donations that people do to their homeland. But if you create a business And an entrepreneur, they create jobs that are infinitely growing, and they don't need to keep feeding those.
I couldn't agree with you more. Amir, I'm a firm believer in one saying. You can give a man a fish and feed him for the day. You can teach a man to fish and feed him for life.
Yeah. And
That's-
sales is, sales is being the ability to pick your own fish and the amount of quantity that you want. And what I love about being back in Pakistan, I was in London. And now I feel like I can compete with you. You're based in Houston. I don't have a competitive disadvantage. Yes, you might be able to go to a few more conferences, so you're meeting people in the right rooms, because I still believe that one face-to-face meeting is worth more than 20 Zooms, right? But like, because we met in a room, we had a face-to-face, 10 minutes. How are you? But you followed through. You followed up with me afterwards, which a lot of people don't do. You're a salesperson, so you did it, and then you said, "Okay, what is it that we can do next? You're coming in the new year. Maybe we can do something." And so hopefully this podcast will lead to something, and then hopefully people that are listening to it will take up and say, "Oh, I like that Frank guy," or some AKA Faruq. Faruq. I'd like to grow my company, and I do think that companies that are in Pakistan should at least, and that can afford, obviously you gotta make your retainers and stuff. I can afford a few $1,000 retainer to get your services and try get their foot in the door, because I think, like, if we're talking about hiring a full-time sales guy based in somewhere like San Francisco, what what are some of the numbers that we're talking about? Like 300,000, or what would you say? Like, how much would a sales guy be? Or I want to say salesperson because I want to be gender neutral. But a New York, Houston, and San Francisco, what do you think the going rates of hiring someone full time would be?
Okay. So you remember you have depth and scope and experience. So I'll take an average. So an 8 to 10 year experienced enterprise seller in the Bay Area, the salary range is going to be 180 to 220 base. And then typically in the SaaS world, the on target earnings, which is double, right? So you means your package is going to be 360 to 440 per annum, right? That's full time. And then you have New York. I would say you could reduce that by 10%. And in a market like Houston, you could probably get away with 25% less. So,
Wow.
yeah. So these are not cheap people or positions to hire in. And now, from a services perspective, you can find people. I know in the Houston market, 120 to 140 salary, and then double that for achievement of target, right? But remember, the targets are stout, right? So your targets are anywhere between, if it's an early stage services company, it's going to be 2 to 4 million. Later stages could be 4 to 8 million, up to 10 million. On a SaaS side, it could be as low as 1 million, right? Because SaaS is very high margin, but then those quotas grow accordingly, right? So anywhere from 2 to 4 million.
So when
And that's
Wow. So when people are looking to create that, there must be models out there that have this. If you reach X amount, we'll do this. Because yeah, they must be able to figure that out. There must be written things that these are standards in the industry. This is how the base and the comp works. So
Yeah,
great. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So great, great, Farouk. Thank you so much for your time. How can people reach out to you and connect to you, and how you've been giving us value? How can people give you value? to connect to you or do business with you?
Well, so a couple of ways you can obviously connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very easily accessible. And it's FarukBhagani. I think I'm the only one out there. So
Yeah.
the probably the best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I will talk to you about my other information. If you guys would want to add that in later in a tag or something like that, we can do that too. So I'll leave that.
Just go ahead and say it. What's your
Okay.
company name? And
All right.
yeah.
Yeah. So my email address is fb@menasa, MENASABD.com. And that's probably going to be the best way to get a hold of me.
Perfect. And Faruq, thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you out in the ecosystem, I'm sure, and hopefully have you back on at some stage. Thank you so much for your value. And sales is at the heart of any corporation. And I think we at Pakistan Software Export Board, what we as a nation are exporting is 3.2 billion as of this year, 2024 financial year. And we're growing at 24% a year. And we want to grow that much further and much faster. And sales is at the heart of it. So all the help we can get with sales in the country is great. And so you are the guru. So it's great to have you on the show. And so thank you, Frank. And I keep calling you Frank now. But that's the programming. So this has been an episode of Tech Destination Pakistan, and your host, Chief Marketing Officer Amir Anzoor. Take care and goodbye.